Hi guys, how's it going? Volume 3 is finally over, and boy, I have to say, it's been a real treat to not only edit these videos and make them for you, but to more or less go back and watch Volume 3. I really don't watch RWBY all that often, mainly because of the fact that it's one of those shows that I really like, and thus I don't want to become desensitized to it by just, constantly watching it over and over and over again. It's one of the reasons why, even though I have the Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood DVD set, I don't watch it all that often. I maybe watch it 4 or 5 times a year, tops. The same thing goes with RWBY. I really haven't watched Volume 3, I'd say in about at least a year and a half, maybe 2 years. And so going back and watching it, and more importantly, going back and watching it and trying to look for all the flaws in it, has been really interesting, mainly because of the fact that I had to be, like you see in my videos, I had to be a little nitpicky in order to find some of those flaws. But in other cases, some things I saw as flaws, I then realized, well, maybe they're not flaws. Maybe they actually mean something more, and I'll think harder on it. And it turned out, yeah, reading some other people's comments, listening to you guys when you write your comments down, I would think, oh wait, no, this isn't really that big of a flaw. It's just, a personal flaw. And well, yes, we can all have our own personal flaws in anything that we watch. At the end of the day, I had to say that I came out of watching Volume 3 liking it even more. And today we're going to be going over my final thoughts about Volume 3. Now, unlike my reviews, where I try to be as objective as possible, my final thoughts are just that. My final thoughts are my personal opinions. Some things that I put in my reviews as I thought was good, I may not like all that much. And some things that I set out as bad, I may actually defend. So let's go over it. But first, as always, let me give you a little bit of a backstory about me watching Volume 3. This was the first volume in which I actually definitively, I didn't watch with everybody else. I did watch it, but I didn't watch it until the very last episode was posted. And the reason for this was because, like I said in my last final thoughts, RWBY inspired me to create my own story. That is to say, create my own first fan fiction. Now, I really don't like that word, and I'm pretty sure most of you don't like that word, just because of the fact that, well, it's been tainted. Sadly, there's just too many fan fiction writers out there that don't really care about a good story or great characters, just want to throw their own ideas out there and hope that they will become famous. That's not what it's about, guys, and you guys know that all too well. But when it came down to mine, I was a little conflicted. I didn't know if I wanted to go forward with it or not, and I thought to myself, you know what? Volume 3 is coming up. I'm realizing that I can't let this idea go, so what am I going to do? I know! I won't watch Volume 3. Instead, I'll focus solely on this task right here, trying to build this few fleets of an idea into an actual story. If it turns out that I actually like it, I'm going to continue with it. If it turns out that it really isn't going anywhere and it was just this random spout of ideas, which, trust me, I get them a lot, and I like the characters, but I really can't make a story out of this, then, you know what, I'm going to have to let it go. So I decided I would not watch Volume 3, I would not watch anything of RWBY. I cut myself completely off of RWBY, and that was so that I can just focus on this and not have any sort of influence from the original show. And 2 things I decided to do. First, I decided, you know what, I'm going to draw my main character. Up until that moment, I really hadn't drawn any of the characters. It was slight designs here and there. I decided, you know what, I'm going to take this doodle, which I'll show on the screen right now, and I will upgrade it to more professional design. Either way, I decided, you know what, I'm going to come up with a backstory, come up with an outline for a main story, and then when I'm all done with that, I'll watch Volume 3. My general, portrayals in my reviews is my general reaction during my first viewing of Volume 3. But enough about those little tidbits that you probably don't really watch and you're skipping through the time chat. Here, clicking 5 seconds forward. So let's continue on and see my final thoughts about RWBY Volume 3. Of course, starting with the bad, so that we can end this on a good note. And the first bad thing that I really didn't like was the first fight. Now, don't get me wrong, I kind of enjoyed the first fight, but I felt that it was lacking in certain aspects. Mainly in the fact that it was lacking in that sense of fun that the other fights had. It wasn't just the characters having fun, it was also whoever was animating it seemed to be having fun just throwing out all these crazy moves and these crazy ideas. I mean, for instance, one of the things I really liked was some of the team members working together. Weiss and RWBY working together, and of course that final punch from Blake and Yang. I just felt that was an interesting callback to something that was likely just spur of the moment in Volume 2, but here it looked like they worked very hard on it, as you could tell with Weiss's shout out. But for the rest of the fight, I felt that it was kind of toned down, and that's probably because Monty didn't have a lot of influence in that, and as many could tell, after his passing, and especially in Volume 4 and 5, there weren't a lot of very good fights, which of course is not that big of a deal with me, mainly because of the fact that I'm more of a character and story person than I am with the whole action and spectacle. And that wasn't the only fight I had a problem with. As you guys could tell, I didn't like the second fight, which was between Juniper and I think Bronze. I think that's their name. It was Juniper and Bronze. And the reason for that was, well, two main reasons. One, yes, I felt it was a bit slower paced. I did enjoy the jokes, believe it or not. Yes, believe it or not, I actually enjoyed the jokes at the time. Going back, I had to say, well, objectively, if you think about it, this is not that funny. It kind of kills the pacing a bit. And that's where I pretty much have to take away something that I actually enjoyed and think objectively about the show. But no, the problem I really had with it was the secondary team and yes, the pace killing. I thought that there could have been just so much more they could have done, especially with Ren. I was hoping that he would show off some interesting acrobatics. And when it came to like this, the other team, Team Bronze, I thought it was almost like it was slapped together, their designs. They seemed lacking in what they could have been. I mean, you think about the other teams that were put out there. I mean, the first one, Team RWBY, I think it was called, their designs were rather incredible, and so was the, I think it was the fan fiction design team, which was, I can't think of the name, but I'm probably going to find it out. I'm going to put it on the screen right now. But still, I love their designs, and it was such an interesting aspect to look into other cultures. But when it came to Team Bronze, I felt that they could have done a bit more. And that's where it became, well, one of the things that I think is bad, disappointing. It had so much potential, didn't utilize it. And continuing with the theme of uninteresting fights, one of the fights that I felt was really disappointing that we didn't get to see was the fight, of course, with Cinder and her gang versus this unknown team. Mainly because of the fact that I thought it would have been interesting to see not only Cinder's abilities come out, but also to see, well, these group of villains work together. And of course, just see Neo kick some butt. And it's kind of funny because while trying to write down notes for this, and I was trying to think of an acronym for Cinder and her gang, because I knew that it was Cinder, Mercury, Emerald, and Neo that was part of the team. And that's where I pretty much came up with an acronym that if the internet has corrupted you enough, you'll be able to get what this pretty much means. You perverts. But anyways, I won't deny that. It was kind of a funny joke when it just came out of nowhere. They were saying, well, we did great, and there's Neo just pretty much face planting somebody into the pavement. But I felt that we could have seen more of them. And I just felt it was a waste of opportunity. Now, as I've said before, when it came down to the mid-season fight, we needed something that was bombastic, something that was far beyond anything that we've seen before, something that would attest to the power the Maiden had. But sadly, the fight between Cinder, Mercury, Emerald, and the Fall Maiden, it just was lacking in everything. We didn't know who the Fall Maiden was, so seeing her lose wasn't like, oh no! And seeing Cinder win was like, well, whatever, I guess. I mean, can we move the plot along, please? But at the end of the day, what I was hoping for was them to confirm the idea that this was indeed an incredibly powerful person. But the problem is that Autumn didn't really fight with any ferocity. Yes, I'm pretty sure she was trying to hold herself back because, you know, she's a good guy and they don't want to kill, you know, Batman style. But I felt that it could have been a lot more. But sadly, they didn't do that, and sadly, the fight suffered significantly for it. And that's really all I can say about that. I mean, I pretty much said what I needed to say. This is where my bias and my trying to think objectively in my reviews, they do collide a little bit here, and where, yes, they do work together. We needed Amber to be more, and she wasn't. Anyways, enough about my character. And speaking again about Cinder fighting somebody, the fight between Cinder and Pure I thought was a bit toned down. It was an interesting fight. I will not deny that. But the problem with it is I thought that, well, just like with the fight between Cinder and Autumn, it just wasn't enough. We needed there to be a bit more panache to it. I felt that Pyrrha was holding too much back. Let's face the fact, Pyrrha doesn't have to hold back against Cinder. Cinder is an incredibly powerful character, and it's clear that, well, this is the part where you have to, yes, put somebody down. But the main issue I had was not, Pyrrha being all too weak and feeble. The main problem I had with it was that this was an interesting look into the character Cinder, and it was just sort of glossed over too quickly. I felt that they could have built this up more. Show that Cinder, yes, was the villain, and there's no denying that you shouldn't feel too sympathetic for her. But to get us to the point where we come back to Red versus Blue, for instance, where a lot of their villains are not really villains. They're just on the opposite side of the board. They're trying to fight for their own thing. I mean, we look at one of the most notable villains, which so happened to be the director, I think it was. And sadly, well, there wasn't just the personality that there was with the director. We knew he was a bad guy and we didn't really like him, but at the end of the day, we couldn't really hate him when we figured all things out. We knew that he was hurting, and we knew that he wanted something back, and we can sympathize him with that. We could not agree that the way he went about it was right, but we could at least understand where he was coming from. Sadly, we really didn't get enough of that with Cinder, which is going to show in the next volume. Now, as you could tell, a lot of my things that so far have been pretty nitpicky, and that's because of the fact that, well, Volume 3 was so good. One of the things that I did feel that it did lack on was, of course, the villain's screen time. I felt that they could have used a bit more. I mean, there was a decent amount of screen time. As I said, going back to the flashbacks and everything, we need those to be stretched out so that we could have more screen time and more understanding about the characters. We didn't need to know everything about their backstory, but we needed to know more about who they were. Sadly, Roosterteeth didn't do this, and I can understand why. There was a lot to do in Volume 3, and even then, it still came out to be pretty damn awesome. God, this shows how awesome it is. I am talking about how awesome it is while I'm trying to explain how terrible it was. I think the only really terrible thing about it was, as I keep saying, Episode 7, the whole flashback episode. That's really the only major flaw about Volume 3, which is saying a lot. I mean, all they really had to do was just stretch those things out, and Volume 3 would have been pretty much perfect. Sadly, they didn't, and that's where, I have to pick on it, but still. And as some people have stated before, one of the things I didn't really like was the White Fang and their motivations. I felt that, yes, them fighting for their people was something, but then just setting a city ablaze and, likely destroying some of the things that they were standing up for, I felt that was like out of the blue. What they could have done, and this is where it should have been done like in Volume 2, where they were setting up that connection between the White Fang, Roman, and of course Cinder, was explain like some sort of plot where they were going to spread the word to as many faunus as they could to get out of the city during this time. And maybe during like Volume 3, like Episode 4 or 5, when we were starting to build up on stuff, they could have dropped that a bit more by saying that even though there were many people seeing the fights at the stadium, many other faunuses have decided to take the summer break off to go to their families. Immediately, we could have even dropped the name of, I'm not entirely sure what it is right now because I haven't watched Volume 4 in a while, but the name of that island where the faunus' kingdom dwells. Sadly, they didn't do this, and because of that, the White Fang and their motivations suffer significantly to the point where we can't really sympathize with them. And that's a problem. These are supposed to be the group that we are supposed to sympathize with because they're fighting for a good cause. They're people. But we can't. Something that a lot of people agreed was Salem just popping out of nowhere was pretty darn terrible. We had no idea who she was. If they had, like, introduced her by putting her monologue in the beginning and the end of every volume, or some form of it, that would have been an interesting way of introducing her, because we would have known that she was a narrator and she had a part in play in the story, but we didn't know who. And having a narrator that's evil is not something that hasn't been done before, but it is definitely something that could have been used here. Sadly, they didn't do that, and yeah, Salem just popping out of nowhere makes us go, what? And it's not like oh my god, what's going on? It's more like, am I still watching RWBY? Yeah, and that's something you never really want with your show. You don't want your audience to just sit there to be confused about, wait, who is this character? Do we know about her? Mainly because of the fact that that takes us out of the story. It destroys our immersion, which is pretty terrible, because up till then, we were pretty immersed. I mean, God, yeah, we were just sucked in. I mean, this is a testimony to how great RWBY is. The fact that its characters are completely fictional, yet they mean so much to us. And speaking about how great RWBY is, time to switch over to the good of RWBY, which is, well, pretty much everything else. But I am going to point out a few things that I particularly like. Starting, of course, with pretty much every other fight that I didn't mention. Every fight so far was pretty good. Like I said, it's been mostly just little nitpicks that I wish that if they just done this, it would have made it so much better. And again, that attests to how great RWBY Volume 3 was. One of my favorite fights, of course, has to be pretty much with everyone else, Crow versus Winter. Yes, both because it was a pretty cool action scene, but I felt that it was also a great way to attribute characters' personalities by colliding them together. We immediately can tell how much they detest each other and yet sort of, well, care about each other by the way they fight, by the way they egged each other on. It wasn't just Crow, toying with Winter. Winter constantly kept one-upping him and trying to, like, pretty much put him down. It was just a wonderful fight scene. And another one I really, really enjoyed was the fight scene between RWBY, Roman, and Neil. Mainly because of the fact that it was Neil and Roman. It attributed to how well those two work together. And again, I'm still along with other people saying that Neil is indeed Roman's daughter, which I have no idea if they'll do this. But I do hope that Roosterteeth do bring her back soon. Not as some sort of villain, but instead as what she is, a child. And it would be interesting to see the other side of the coin. Because, well, Roman may be her father, but who's her mother? And it would be interesting to see that, and then more importantly to see that her mother is, I wouldn't say as nefarious as Roman, but understands their past and is trying to help Neil. And it would be an excellent way to show us that indeed Neil can't talk. Which I am in agreement with everyone that, yeah, Neil is mute. She acts like a Wallace and Gromit here. Mainly, she is able to portray so many emotions via just her facial expressions. And Roosterteeth, I give them great applause for that, because that's not something that you can easily do in a 3D animated environment. Speaking about other characters, there were so many good ones. I mean, if I had a list, it would pretty much just include everybody that was on there. I mean, there's only like a few that I was like, what? And that's, of course, the ones that just popped out of nowhere, like Salem, but ones that didn't really play a good enough part, and then were just there, like Amber. But if I had to say some of my favorite characters here, again, yeah, Neil's going to be up there, Roman's going to be up there. But I also have to say Crow and Winter. More Winter than Crow. I know I'm a little bit of a weirdo when it comes to that. But Crow, we just liked. It was a natural thing. I liked it with Winter, mainly because of the fact that you had to work to like her. I mean, it wasn't something that just came natural. We immediately realized that, yeah, she's supposed to be the bitchy one. She's like She's like Weiss on steroids. But oh my god, there was just so much good with Volume 3. I mean, literally, the list I have for bad things is pretty big, but it was because I had to be pretty nitpicky. I was being very specific. And there goes my text, but regardless. When it came to my good, I have like this tiny list, and it's because it's pretty much like everything else. That's all I have to do. Volume 3 was just so great. And one of the things I really liked was the stakes. In Volume 1 and 2, we really didn't get the the actual fear of repercussions from villains or anything like that, just because of the fact that it was just having fun, which I really liked. I really liked how Roosterteeth planned this out so that Volume 1 and 2 would be really great and we were having lots of fun and get you into this mood, and then break it to you going, no, yeah, remember when we told you that this place sucked? Well, here you go. And I really enjoyed that characters died, others were hurt, we just got utterly obliterated. And remember, I had to watch this all in one go. I didn't wait episode by episode and get to talk to my friends and anything like that. No, I experienced this all in the 2 hours I think that Volume 3 amounts to. I think it's maybe like 2 or 3 hours. I'm not entirely sure. But still, I felt that this is one of the reasons why I like Volume 3. I wouldn't say the most, but when it came to just everything coming together, that's when I definitely liked it the most. Mainly because of how Roosterteeth held no bars, went full forward with all of this. And again, great applause to you guys. Jumping back to some of my complaints, the things I thought were bad. This has nothing to do with RWBY. It has, of course, to do with the RWBY fandom. And this is one of the reasons why I do not consider myself a fan of anything. Mainly because of the fact that you have to associate yourself with certain people. Because of the fact that one of the few scenes that I really liked about characters were, of course, the scenes between Blake and Yang during their whole little kerfuffle. You guys know exactly what I'm talking about. And of course was that scene between Yang and RWBY. I just loved how much emotion was coming out between these characters. And again, great applause to all the voice actors there. I'm not just talking about Lindsay, Barbara, and Aaron. I'm not just talking about that. I'm talking about pretty much every voice actor there did a fantastic job, except for maybe Garrett. Another thing I really enjoyed was the world-expanding teams, the other teams. Again, yeah, while Team Bronze could have been a bit more, I really liked how we got to see outside of it, because that's why I like about going back again to the fandom and going back to the fan fiction, is that some people don't try to just, they insert their own professional characters into the story. No, they try to expand the world of RWBY by adding more stories. That's what I love about it, because if you think about it, that's what pretty much each of these teams have. They have their own stories. They have their own things that they have gone through, their own trials and tribulations. Hell, we are about to get I think it's more or less a fan fiction story. I really don't consider it part of the actual canon, mainly because, well, that's more or less what, like I said, it's a fan fiction story, but it's the story of Team Coffee after the Fall of Beacon that we're supposed to be getting. I'm not sure if it's come out yet. I have probably no plans of looking at it just yet, because I'm pretty busy, guys. I have a lot to do right here. I still have to go to work in order to make some money. That's why if you can, support me on Patreon. It really would help. But at the end of the day, I just really enjoyed how much of the world we got to see. We'll be able to see a bit more of this in Volume 4 and 5, which is something that a lot of people just glossed over when it came to those volumes. They just said, it sucks, it doesn't have money in it, but that's what I really liked, was that world building. Because let's face it, you can have an interesting story and great characters, but what really is the icing on the cake is expanding it beyond that and making these characters feel more than just people, but people in their own world. That's one of the reasons why we just love other shows, like Full Metal Alchemist. We love it because it doesn't feel like these characters are playing out in a story. It feels like they're playing out in a world of their own. And now I would like to wrap this up with one last thing that I really liked that I know you guys are not going to like, but that's Cinder. I really enjoyed the character this volume. I mean, before we didn't have any idea who she was. In volume 2 we knew that she was the antagonist, but that was about it. But in volume 3 we got to see a much deeper side to her that I will expand upon when we get into volume 4 and 5. But we got to see how, well, vulnerable she was. This is something that a lot of people don't really like to bring up, mainly because of the fact that they just like to say that, oh, Cinder's a terrible character. And again, I'm pretty sure I know why you say that. But when it comes down to it, I really do think that Cinder is a sympathetic character. She's someone who seems to have been hurt by the world. You can tell by how she feels that it is her destiny to become the Fall Maiden. It is her destiny to do this. And I have to say, a combination of Jessica Negri, a combination of Roosterteeth, and a combination of how Monty initially set this out have made this villain an interesting character. Has finally brought it back to, again, that aspect of a villain that you can't exactly fully hate. You understand that, yes, you can't root for them. But there's also something where you feel sorry for what they had to go through. Feel sorry for what they are right now. And I know that's going to be an unpopular opinion, but like I said, these are my final thoughts, and that's just it. All of this has been my final thoughts. I hope you guys enjoyed it. What are your final thoughts on RWBY Volume 3? What exactly did you guys feel when you had to watch it? Were you like me, where you just waited until you got all the episodes? Or did you watch it by episode by episode? Tell me now in the comment section below. I really am looking forward to some of it. Also, tomorrow we're going to be having the comment review, which I hope you guys all like. And again, thank you so much for watching my videos. Thank you so much for commenting. And just a big hand for Roosterteeth and what they've done with RWBY. I'm going to be taking a break after this, after I'm done posting the comment review and the top and bottom 5. As always, I'll be taking a break. But I will be back to you guys soon. You guys take care. Thanks for watching. I'm Ricardo, the Cynical Critic. And these are my final thoughts on RWBY Volume 3. Which pretty much sums up to be that it was just awesome. Enough said. You guys take care. See ya.